This is Sunday Night Live, where the Bible is discussed and relationships are deepened. I'm Trenton Barksdale.
I'm Ben Cunningham.
And we invite you to join us for some good conversation about God's Word.
Good evening, everybody. This is Trenton with Sunday Night Live. We want to welcome you to our second season of this wonderful podcast. We are looking forward to a lot of good things to come from this season and this year, and we hope and pray that you will help us to continue to grow our podcast, not just with the way we've been able to do it this past year, but now, as you can see, we are now on YouTube. We are very excited to announce this, and we pray that you will share the link with all of your friends and all your family, so that way they can be able to listen in and hear more about God's Word and the beauty that we can find within. As you all know, Ben is alongside me yet again for a wonderful episode. Ben, how are you today, dude?
Man, a mixed bag of excitement, exhaustion, and positivity, just overflowing. So yeah, definitely excited to get this new year kicked off in the right way and in the right direction. And I think tonight, I think we're in for a real treat tonight.
I agree. As we always say here on the podcast, a hearty amen, brother man. Hearty amen.
Yeah.
And as y'all can see, we have a special guest with us for our first inaugural episode of season 2. This is Kevin Slack. I have just met Kevin within the last 24 hours of us recording this, but I will tell you, I'm excited to have him on. And I will let Ben further introduce him in just a second. But first, Ben would like to share some news that actually involves Kevin. So go ahead and bring us to speed as to what's been going on lately with you,
Okay.
Ben.
So much like a lot of you, I'm sure you've had a very busy holiday season. We have as well here at the Cunningham house. And for us, some of this exciting news and excitement began for me, at least in earnest, over the summer, this past summer, when we had a gospel preacher by the name of Jason McCreary come and present a lesson during our summer series on uh, adoption. And the title of his lesson, I believe, was "Adoption is the Gospel." And for some reason, that lesson resonated with me. It struck a chord in me. And he was talking a lot in that lesson about adoption and the adoption process and the system that is in place surrounding that process, and some of the pitfalls and some of the things that are broken with it, which it is a government organization, so there's going to be some problems with it, as we all, I think, are aware of. But anyways, fast forward to a few months ago, when all this was kind of just this, again, all this, what he had talked about really stuck with me and struck a chord with me. Keep that in mind. But a few months ago, probably 4 or 5 months ago, I saw an advertisement on Facebook that struck me as a little bit strange, because the heading was from a news station in North Carolina. And as many of you know, I don't get very many advertisements like that from out of state. I live in Florida. So that one stuck out to me, and I read it, and I clicked on it, and I opened it, and it was a video. And it was an advertisement from, done by the news station there in Charlotte, I believe, Charlotte, North Carolina. And they were advertising the Children's Home Society of North Carolina. And for that advertisement, they used this young man named Jody, which I don't know his last name, because I think there's some laws against sharing all that information. And so anyways,
Yeah, that makes sense.
they featured this child in his story. It was a little bit of an interview. And after I watched that, I was basically just hit like everything from that sermon that was preached over the summer, it just hit me like a ton of bricks all at once. And I was moved by it. And I immediately shared it with my wife, Kayla. Within 5 minutes of me sharing that with her, she messaged me back and said, "We got to get this kid." And that began a process for us in our family of walking through this broken system. And I'm sorry if I keep calling it broken. It is a system, and I think that that's a good thing, and that there is a means to an end there. So for that, I apologize, but we started down this process, and um, what we came up against was not really expected because this child is, again, he's out of state, so there's going to be some red tape involved with all that. And what Kayla and I decided to
No
do
doubt.
was we decided to pray about it, of course, and we decided to just take it step by step. And if the door was open, uh, and if it was meant to be, right, God would open the door, and He would open doors for us along the way. And what we found as we started making our way through this convoluted process was He kept opening doors. And one of those doors is sitting with us today. And his name's Kevin. And he was one of the people that the door really just swung open when we met Kevin, or when Kayla actually reached out to Kevin. And this whole process, kind of began in earnest. Um, and we were able to kind of circumvent in some ways, I guess it may be how you would describe it. But long story short, the state of Florida wanted us to go on a waiting list to even get certified to be able to adopt a child in foster care. And Kevin was one of those open doors, as I said, who kind of helped us and guide us
Mhm.
through an otherwise daunting system and kind of point us in the right direction. And I really feel more than ever at this point that we're on the right track. And as Kevin was telling us during our certification process, I couldn't help but think the information that he was sharing was so valuable, not just to someone who is interested in adopting a child, but a Christian who is interested in their fellow man. And I think,
Mhm.
I think a lot of us go through and see maybe that system. Maybe we don't go through it, but maybe we're aware of it. But we don't see
Mhm.
really all that's going on with some of these kids and the process that they have to go through just to get to the point of termination of parental rights. And that was a term that was new to me a couple days ago, and Kevin introduced me to, and he kind of
Mhm.
walked Kayla and I through this, and it was one of the most eye-opening things uh, that I've ever heard. Quite frankly, in association with adoption through foster care, and I thought
Yeah.
at the time um, our audience in particular would be very interested in what Kevin had to say to Kayla and I. And we asked him to come on, and here he is. And I'm telling you guys, we're in for a treat because he's going to kind of walk us through what he walked Kayla and I through, and really just kind of open our eyes to the world around us, and to kind of get us to see that adoption is all around us. Trenton is adopted. Um, there's probably people that you know in
Yes.
your life that are adopted. And when you really stop to think about it, it's everywhere. But it wasn't anything that I really thought about. And so with that, I'd like to ask Kevin to kind of just bring everybody up to speed on his background. The things that he did that got him to this point where he's at now, where he's helping people to guiding people through this convoluted system. And um, God help him in that, because it's the Lord's work, I'm convinced. So Kevin,
Absolutely.
with that
Hearty amen to
introduction,
that.
I hope you can kind of walk us through your background and how it is that you got involved in all this, and where it is that your puzzle piece fits.
Yeah, yeah. Well, great question. In regards to my work, my history, I have worked with child welfare and mental health since 1987. So it's been a little while. I know I look so young. People don't figure it to me, but here I am. Now, the thing is with that, when I say child welfare and mental health, that's a broad field. When I began off, I was working in psych hospitals, and then I worked some with group homes, and then at one point the things kind of transitioned for me where I started working a lot with therapeutic foster care. And I was working therapeutic foster care and then some traditional foster care even before I really got involved in adoptions. I didn't understand that piece of it for quite a while. And then as time went on, I began working with adoptions and adoption supports. Actually, when I was out in Tampa, living in that area, and then just, God bless me. He just connected me with wonderful people, and talk
Amen.
about that explosion. My eyes just continue to open to see things, and it helped me in all areas. From every area of understanding this journey. And right now, what I do, you were talking about that process. Often, I think I probably mentioned this to you. Said often, I wish I could talk to people before they, when they're just getting started, and certainly before they give up. Because
Yeah.
And that's why I think
through
this
this
is so
process,
important.
it's easy.
Sorry, I did.
Oh yeah, it's easy to lose hope. No, it's man, my energy's high, so it's hard to talk.
All
No
right.
problem. No
That's how it
problem.
is for us too.
I'm
So go
loving
I
it.
get
ahead.
excited. I get excited about this. But what I found was, so when you're going through the system, certainly the Florida system is, because my certification and the training is working with families who are pretty much living out of Florida.
Mhm.
And what I found was in this has been 20 years so just in Florida that I've seen this, is that when Florida has kind of an approach on this when you want to adopt from foster care, and at this point they don't really recruit hard if you're looking for younger children, and people don't understand that. And when I say younger, I mean 10 and under. In fact, they will basically tell you that we don't have them. That's not quite true. There are children. What the issue is that they don't have to recruit because there are plenty of people who want little children. And so that's not really a core. And so if you're not, if you're looking for a younger child, they'll often kind of turn you away and just say, well, we don't really, that's not really our cup of tea. We need people who want the teenagers and stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so a lot of people kind of give up hope thinking, well, that's the end of the game. I'm like, well, not quite. There are these private providers who are involved in this. Oh, it throws people off when you mention a private provider because you're thinking of private agency like they have their own children, but that's not what it means. It means there are people who help you with this process, what they call the home study process, and they have this people who kind of help you reach out into the system as far as looking for children there. In fact, the good ones not only help you in Florida, they really will give you guidance across the U.S. Because once you have a home study, you really are able to look almost anywhere in the U.S. There's really not much reason not to, depending on some of the states and all kind of how they work things a
Right. Yeah.
little.
Um, I will say this before you go on, Kevin.
Yeah,
I was adopted out of Florida, oddly enough, and this was in the early '90s. And then with what you were saying about having home studies and whatnot,
yes,
I've actually got siblings-in-law that adopted out of Arizona through an organization called Sacred Selections, and they are phenomenal. And I would highly recommend looking into them because they have helped. I'm wanting to say 400 or 500 something kids and still going.
Yeah,
Um,
they're a good
yeah. There's some
organization.
awesome programs out there.
yeah,
Some awesome folks who
yeah. And so,
yeah,
y'all, as you listen to Kevin, I want you to just notice how he's able to give us some insight to this, because when you hear what happens with adoption, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And
No.
he's going to tell you more about that right now. So go ahead and continue what you were saying.
Well, so then where's my role in this? Well, one that I do try to kind of guide folks a little bit and say, hold on, the game's not quite over unless you've already lost heart.
Yeah.
That there are some avenues there, some good agencies, but you have to be kind of looking for something specifically, because when you're talking about private agencies, historically that means infants or international. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Last 20 years or so, they started shifting gears in that you had some really good ones come around and said, hold on, boy, we got a lot of children in foster care who are just not finding homes. And we can, boy, there's a whole area for us to reach into. And so they started getting into that. And so often I kind of talk to families about kind of what they may want to look for when they're looking for an agency, because infants, that's a different game. And that's just a whole different approach to this.
Yeah.
Internationals are a very different approach on this.
No doubt. I've heard of that before.
Yeah, that's just very different. But then you start looking into foster care. And that's kind of where my role comes into this, because when you're adopting from foster care, there's some of the requirements that the agency that you work with will help you with, as far as for the home study. And that usually entails your background, finding out about you, medical background, your home, and a lot of other things. But another piece of this is that there's some classes that are required. Because if you're going to go into this, the system, I say the system, but no other word for it really, but they want to make sure you understand what you're kind of getting into and you prepare for a few things, because the dynamics of children going into foster care is really different. There's some things you need
It's
to kind of
mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This was an eye-opener for
It's
me.
great. I told, as I said before, man, conversations make this easier for me. Otherwise, I can just go into old man mode and start talking. So there's some trainings that are required, and basically what happened was the trainings were already part of foster care, because if you're going to go into foster care, they say, man, you really need to understand some of these dynamics that you're walking into, that just a part of this. Now, when I say dynamics, every child's different, every scenario is different, but they see there's a lot of common ground. There's a lot of familiar ground and some things that you'll be looking at. They say you need to really kind of understand this a bit,
Consider it.
what's involved in this, because let me think about, what is the foundation of foster care? Loss and trauma. That is the foundation of foster care. I mean, it boils down to abuse or neglect. It tends to be there are other scenarios that play out, but that tends to be the heartbeat of the foundation of foster care, of what brings children into our system. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means we are dealing with wounds.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with wounded people, and wounds, if I get a cut, I bleed. Well, a lot of these wounds are emotional wounds, and the way that comes out is with behavioral stuff, and it comes out in emotional stuff, and it comes out to all this other stuff that's kind of there. And so they want to kind of make sure you really understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other things they kind of prepare you to, whether it's becoming licensed as a foster family or becoming prepared to be an adoptive family.
Right. Yeah.
And that's my role in that, is I try to kind of provide one of the many trainings that are out there that are certified by the state. That, hey, this is the program. Now, one thing I kind of shared with Ben before when I was meeting with him, I said, look, we call this a training. I said, the truth is, this is not a training in the traditional sense of a training. Because when you're looking at traditional training, you're going to memorize a lot of stuff, and at the end of the day, you can spout it. What this really is much more like is a giant orientation. It's not a how-to, because who can write that book? That'd be a wealthy man that finds a silver bullet and can write that book. But they say, we want you to really start looking at some things that we know, but
It's going to be a part of it.
And if we just, we just want you to process this stuff a bit, make sure you're really getting into your heart the pieces that are involved in this, and the potentially lasting, lifelong impact of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where my piece comes in. Now, I think, my role is usually if you are going through the county agency, I kind of divide things up with private agencies and county agencies. But if you're going through a county agency, I'll go ahead and say this now, they're usually going to want you to go through them because they're very guarded
Yep.
about that, which for good reason, because they want to make sure that one, they want to make sure the fidelity of their program. You are being given what they think is the best. But they also, if they're going to do, if you're going to become an adoptive family, that's a relationship you're building with that agency. So they really want to make sure that that you and them that you work well together, that you play nice with each other,
Yeah, just a little bit, just a little bit.
and just that you get to know each other. Generally, I'll kind of work more with private agencies because usually going through the county, they kind of want you to go through them anyway. And so if people ask me all the time, so what can I do? I said, talk to your county first. Make sure they're okay with you going outside their doors. Otherwise, yeah, that's what I'm here for. I love it.
Yeah, and I am thankful that we have men like you who are willing to be in the field, because it's like
Me
you
too.
said. And Kevin, I will tell you this as well. I was in the healthcare profession myself. I worked as a registered nurse, and for almost for almost 4 full years, I dealt with. There were times where I had people that had to deal with the HR in order to foster,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that is not easy, especially like you said, when you deal with families that just up and leave their child, that abuse them, that neglect them. And
Right.
I think about one time when I saw a patient. Oh, bless their heart. I I hate to even try to bring it up, but there was a time when I saw a little baby that was 6 months old and not growing like they were supposed to.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I know you've probably seen a lot worse, but
Yeah.
I just think about this, how we are having to deal with these government agencies, like you said, that are trying to limit kids from being adopted. And that's one thing, going back to talking about sacred selections, is
Right.
that they are looking for they look for families that, and they look for mothers that are giving birth to these babies and saying, hey, we want to be able to help you find a home for these kids.
Yeah.
And so, in light of all that, I just want to ask, like, what is one of the worst cases? And when I say worst, what is one of the most gut wrenching things you have seen in your experience with all of this? If you don't mind sharing that, because I think it would help us to realize the brokenness of the American adoption system.
Well, for me, three things kind of come to mind when you ask that question. Okay. And so there's the one aspect of it that's heartbreaking, which is what generally comes to mind when we think of the history of our children. And that would boil down to physical or sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that can be very intensive, heartbreaking. And what people, there every now and then I'll have somebody who'll say, well, I don't believe in evil. And I said, then you're not a social worker. You haven't, you haven't had your eyes open. Evil's around. It's alive. It breathes.
Yeah.
It's really there. And you see the most fragile of creation, the most damaged from it.
Mm-hmm.
You have probably one image of horrendous image. There are no nice images of physical or sexual abuse.
Yeah.
But what boggles the mind is when you have children who aren't even speaking yet, who people do horrible things to, and you're like, oh my God, you know what, so there's that aspect of it. I really don't want to give stories about that because
Yeah. I can understand that for sure.
it'll just give you nightmares thinking about that. Something that we don't think about quite as often is that the other aspect of it is neglect. And we don't tend to think about the seriousness of what that means
Yeah.
and the seriousness of that impact. When that child, and now I'm talking about neglect, I'm not just talking about sometimes they're hungry, they're not getting a little attention. I'm talking about that baby that's being left in that crib all day.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm talking about that child knowing no one is paying attention to this kid, and this kid will start to have, that's often, believe it or not, often that failure to thrive, that the basis
Yeah.
of that's going to be in neglect.
Yeah. And that goes back to that baby I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you see that child just laying there, and you don't realize, you think, okay, if I step in now, I'm going to be able to change things. Well, I hope so, but
Hmm.
I don't know so. Because, and the reason I say that is because we have these stages of development that certain things are supposed to take place, and if they don't take place, man, we're really in danger of it never happening.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
we don't realize that
you
piece.
went into that on, I think it was Friday. Explain that to everybody, because there are developmental things that happen, and one of the first, you explained it so well when you talked about mimicking, and some of the things that these kids, that they just don't have, man. And it's like, well, you wonder why they got these problems later on in life, and it's like, well, things build on each other. So go into that. That was fascinating.
Well, I'll give you kind of a simple, yeah, I can give you like kind of a simple example. Toilet training
Uh,
with children using the bathroom. Very, you think, how simple can that be? And yet you'll have children who will come to that you'll be dealing with who are like 6 or 7 years old and they've never been toilet trained. They don't know how to use the bathroom. And we get mad at them without realizing some things that have taken place here, or haven't taken place. See, when you and I have our child, what do we do with that infant? We respond to every need. We
yeah.
respond
Yep.
to everything. Every time that child cries, we jump. We check the air, how bad it smells. If it smells too bad, we ask the wife to go in.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
But what we don't really, we check if the kid's hungry. We check if it's too hot, too cold. Check if it's got to be gassed. How many
Yeah.
how many shirts have we had to replace because of a kid burping and spitting up all over us?
Yeah.
But, but what we don't realize, one of the many things we're doing, one, we're building attachment, by the way, when we're doing that. Every
Yes.
time we hold that kid, every time we pick that child up, every time we make these goofy faces and we talk to them, man, we're lighting their little brains on fire and we're lighting it up and we're building this time. But also, what we're doing there is when we're engaging with that child, we're teaching that child a couple of things. One is this is how we communicate with each other. This is how we engage. Is every time you make a noise, I am your world and I am there. I'm going to respond. And that kid becomes attuned to that. But what we do without even realizing what we're doing is we're teaching that kid to become attuned to what's going on with it. We're teaching that child, when I got to use the bathroom, boy, I'm uncomfortable. I make a noise. Mom and dad are right there. Or when I'm hungry or whatever. And what does that have to do with toilet training? Well, we don't even realize it, but all we're actually doing, when do we toilet train a child? Usually, around 2 years old, right? Somewhere in that window of
Usually
time.
somewhere in there. Hmm.
We're just building on what we already did. Before, every time we changed the diaper, we cleaned them up, we did everything, and now we're saying, okay, now when your body is making these weird effects, and you're uncomfortable, here's what I want you to do.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of shifting things. But what happens to a child who's been severely neglected and left in that bed is that they lose attunement to what's going on inside of them.
Hmm.
And so you'll have a kid who's 6 or 7 and will say, you can walk, you can get up, you know how to use the bathroom. The problem is the kid has lost their
Don't.
sense of I have to go.
Hmm.
And what happens is now we have to find a whole nother way to approach that because they're not attuned to this stuff. And it's hard to make them reattuned when they've lost that attunement. They become desensitized to what they were initially very sensitive to, you know?
Sure.
And so these things build on each other in the whole lifetime, just kind of
Absolutely.
building up like that. Some of the most severe damage I was sharing with Ben and his wife is that some of the most severe, as bad as physical and sexual abuse impacts children, which is horrendous.
Hmm.
When you neglect can actually be worse. The severe neglect can actually be worse because when we're dealing with neglect is that foundation. I mentioned that engagement with the child is the foundation for attachment. Well, why is that so important? Well, variety of reasons. But one of the things that I don't think really think about or become aware of, attachment is the foundation for empathy.
Hmm.
What does that mean? Well, when I got this bond with you, because you've been taking care of me, and man, you are my world and I am your world. What that means is attachment says, look, when something good is happening to you, man, I feel good about it. I'm happy for you because I have empathy. That's empathy.
Yeah.
It works the other way as well. When something bad happens to you, I feel horrible because, man, I got empathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, empathy is the foundation for conscience, right and wrong. So these things, I mean, how's that connected to conscience? Well, because I feel bad when something happens to you, I feel miserable when I am the cause of that pain.
Hmm.
I feel miserable when I've done it and I see how that impacts. Or the other side of that is when something good happens to you, I feel good when I did something that you like.
Yeah.
Right.
And that becomes I say these are all building blocks. And they just build, build, build. It's an amazing thing here. And I
Yeah.
mean, I hope I'm not talking to you guys to
Well,
death.
no,
No,
and
you were fine. You were
one of the things that I wanted to add, I know when you were going over that in the class and when you were going over it again just now, I wanted to share this with everybody because I think it's important. Um, this happens with all of us, not physically, but spiritually. Follow me with you with me just a minute here, okay? W- At one point in time, I think we were all lost in sin, and we were lacking that connection. Maybe
fine.
we didn't even know we needed it, and you know I, I think I think that the parallel there is so strong, and it points so powerfully to the system that God has designed, not just in the family unit itself, but in the kingdom of heaven. I mean, he is our father, right? And he's a good father. He's a provider, and he cares about us. And one of the things that I know Trenton and I wanted to share uh, was that aspect of it. This, shifting this idea or this pattern to the spiritual, because we're all lost without God, without Christ, and I think that it's just such a powerful image of um, of His divine power and His divine um, His design in all of it, and everything that is in this life. When you break it down to the elemental parts and nuts and bolts of it, like Kevin just did, it points to a creator, and it points to a design, and it points to a plan that
Yes.
ultimately will bring us home. And I think that's such a
Right.
beautiful thing,
Yeah.
and I think that's why adoption and this concept of coming home, you know, is so powerful.
Hmm.
Um,
I agree. Hearty amen.
that aside, I thought it would be so cool if Kevin could, and I know I mentioned this to you the other day. It might be a little bit difficult to do without your whiteboard and your wonderful handwriting. But if we could paint that picture of John and Mary that you did, because I think a lot of people don't understand how easily these bad things can happen to just anybody. If you could
Hmm.
walk us through
Yes.
that um that Bob Ross painting that
Yeah,
you gave us the other night, I mean, I think that would help people
yeah.
understand just how fragile and just how close we all are, in some ways
Yes.
uh, to this catastrophe, that could happen. I think it was eye opening for me, and it's still stuck with
Right.
me. But
Yeah.
if you could, I don't know if you
Yeah.
were
There is
if you're
a
willing to.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. Let me preface this. This is a illustration, a story that is part of the old traditional MAPP program. And it is a illustration of to help really, as I say, this was initially designed for foster families, and it was really to kind of walk them through the how quick life can turn over and people can get lost. And by the way, part of the purpose behind this story is to really show is that birth families are not all monsters. When I say there's evil out there, but there's a lot of people who just get lost. In fact, I think the majority just get lost. And just things happen in life. Life starts spinning in out of control ways. All it takes is one flat tire, man. Suddenly the car is off course. And life is like that. And so in the old tradition, there is a MAP program. There is this illustration. This we often refer to as the Lily story, and it tells a story of this couple who, in essence, they've started high school sweethearts. They, as many don't know, do we have high school sweethearts who marry anymore? I don't know if anybody wants to get married anymore, but you got this couple who starts this journey. They have kids. They basically start falling into some roles that they were already familiar with. The husband in this case, he kind of falls in the same role that his dad did before him, working in the factory and just kind of working in the same things that his dad did because he's familiar with that. That's what he's comfortable with. The mom, she was due to some of her history and past, she'd kind of fallen into a role of taking care of family. She had taken care of her initial family that she had grown up in, and so when she married, she just kind of transitioned now to her own family where she has her own two little girls, and she's kind of in that role. And that was kind of a description. I don't know if families are quite in the same line anymore, but that used to be that kind of that setting where you had the husband was the breadwinner and mom was
Yeah.
often at home. And the initial idea is to say, okay, let's look at this brief picture we have of their family and who they are, and try to get and what that does, it kind of helps you connect to them a little bit. You
Yeah.
see, dad, he has an older sister, but like many families, family doesn't always get along, and they don't have
Yeah.
a good relationship with her because his sister and his wife don't like each other. There's always a lot of conflict. Whereas with the wife, she has a baby brother. At this point, he's like 19 or 20 years old, and he's like many kids at that age. I know they're adults, quasi. But that said, he's kind of bouncing around and stuff. And these are their closest connections, and they're not very close. And so what happens in the story is it walks you through where they have a bad evening.
Mm.
And the bad evening starts off during the day, and it starts off with dad losing his job.
Mm-hmm.
People lose their job, but boy, when you're the only breadwinner, that's another level of stress,
Yes.
you know. And so he's coming home, and when he comes home, he has to have this family meeting. He talks to the wife, obviously, but he has these two children who are 6 and 2 years old. And so he's walking. He feels like he needs to talk to Lily, the youngest. And of course, everybody knows you don't want to bring children into your adult fears and concerns, and that's not what he's trying to do. What's happening here, and this is a scenario pretty much anybody can understand. His little girl's about to have a birthday, and because of this birthday coming up right with him losing a job, they're having to make some changes. And in this case, the change is they were supposed to go somewhere special, which is like Disney World. And if you've been to Disney World, I haven't been in years. Why? Same reason a lot of people don't go. Dinero.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's
that's
expensive.
exactly right. And I just went this past year, and I had to go and keep Ben straight down there in Florida. But go ahead with your story.
And you might have had to get a loan when you went there. I mean, there's a
Just
lot
a
going
little
on
bit.
there,
Well,
man.
just a little bit.
You're going into the hole. This guy just lost his job, so that part of the birthday is not going to be able to happen. And of course, children don't understand. And we talk a bit about how dad copes with stress. And in this case, dad's he doesn't do well with stress. He doesn't lose control or get angry or shout or stuff like that. but he has trouble breathing. He has trouble processing when stress is right on top of him. And so he basically wants to move his daughter, just try to get a breath to breathe. And in that process, she slips, she falls. And again, like many homes, they have furniture, and when she falls, she hits her head. And then begins the real journey because they got to make a trip to the hospital. And like with many of us, we're at the hospital, we're nervous, we're anxious, we don't speak very well. And they start asking, well, what happened here? And we try to tell what happened. But in this story, the hospital hearing what happened, they're starting to wonder, is this abuse? Did something that he hurt this kid? Did he
Yeah.
do something? And their job is not to know what abuse is, but their job is, if they think it might be, to go ahead and report it.
Yes.
And so they call in this case, CPS, Child Protective Services, and say, hey, you need to check this. And so we get someone who comes. Now, at this stage of the game, and anybody who's listening to me is probably like, Kevin, we don't lose children that fast. You're right. It doesn't happen that fast. There's a lot of steps here. I know that. And so, but what's happening in this case, at this stage, there's not really a lot of concern. I'm not walking through there. Why would there not be concern? We talk about, tell the family, well, there's no history here. There's no, no history as far as being the hospital, hospitalizations. There's no history, no. And CPS, they got a lot of your information, right on hand. They can do a lot of that background check a lot quicker than you can. So they're checking a lot of stuff there, and there's no red flags at this point, other than something has happened tonight. Well, we talk about in the story about how dad and how he deals with stress when they go home. Well, now he's got added stress. Even though he's not quote unquote in trouble, man, they just were embarrassed to death by CPS, child welfare, meeting them at the hospital in front of all these people.
Yes.
And now you got that embarrassment, and you got
Shame.
the lost job, and you just shame and embarrassment. All this stuff is kind of adding up, and Dad's solution is the solution of a lot of people. I think we'll have a drink to relax, And problem is, Dad's probably not he may or may not be a serious drinker. We don't know, but this becomes the point where things start kind of diverging. Things start going south very fast in this story, and he gets in trouble, basically DUI that same night. He ends up getting a DUI, and from there things spiral. Now mom's in a panic because she's at home in the apartment by herself, and she is just in a state of where, okay, my God, what do I do here? And she's in a panic. And so when I'm meeting with families, we're going over this. So we're talking about where mom's at now. But then we start looking at where the children are at, because children are not immune to this stuff. They don't understand any of it, but they're not immune. And we talk about how 2-year-olds, that kind of that behavior you start getting from them, which is normal, but it's all
Nervous behavior.
Yes.
We talk about exactly. We talk about mom's history of dealing with kids who are stressful. So, well, mom didn't have a mom since she was 8 years old, so she hasn't really had the modeling for dealing with child stress. And then we talk about some other things, and the story spirals to where one of the children get injured again. Again, it's not intentional. In fact, this time it is the child's own foolishness that ends up creating the scenario. But here's the problem: within just a few days, you're back at the hospital with the same kid. And so now the whole world begins to look different. Dad's in jail, he's unemployed, same kid, another potential head injury here, and things begin to spiral there. And so in this story that we're kind of walking through, and Ben, I don't know if I'm hitting all the points you want me to.
Yes, you are. You are.
But
You're hitting it.
Yeah, so we're really just kind of in this story saying, okay, life can spiral and things get really out of control here. And it really does, and we start looking at the impact of the family's history. We start looking at the fact of not really having a strong support system to deal with it when you're in trouble like this, the broken connections. But something that we're touching upon when we're talking about this story is how this stress begins to reveal some stuff. Okay. And so when we start seeing the behavior specifically of the older child, the 6-year-old, we're starting to see her behavior ratchet up beyond what we tend to see with children. We begin to see some behaviors in her that she's really regressing. I mean, you're seeing some out of control behavior like you would see with the 2-year-old, kind of those temper tantrums, but you also see some real loud, aggressive type of behavior here that they hadn't really seen this same level. They've seen it, but dad's presence always kept a lid on it. But now that dad's not there, you're seeing this other level. And what that will translate into later in our story is we discover there was some abuse happening at one point, that there was something else. And I don't want to reveal everything in the story in case you do end up going someone through and going
Yeah,
through the whole
don't
thing.
spoil it.
But yeah, we don't want to blow everything here. There's a few more heartaches, where this story goes. But that is a lot of the key is how pain and stress, it reveals stuff, but also how with the family, they're not necessarily an evil family. In this case, by the way, I will say this: the abuse that happened wasn't mom and dad. One of the things that I didn't really get a chance, I didn't talk so much in detail with Ben and his wife, is looking at statistics in regards
Yes.
to some of the types of abuse we look and who does it. I talked about it a little bit, but one of the things we didn't really talk, I did talk about the point, one point we did in the past needing to talk about was the fact when you're looking at, say, sexual abuse in particular. Okay, that's one that kind of scares us all to death. And talking about how we often are in a panic about trafficking, sexual trafficking. It's a big issue nowadays. And one thing I kind of hit with them, I said, well, it's the big commercial issue. But if you're really going to look at sexual abuse, what no one's really talking about is the fact the majority of it is in the family.
Yes. Think of that.
You're when you start really looking at things, the majority by far is people we know. And I did kind of talk about that with him, but what I didn't bring out was the fact what you need to understand is some of the last statistics. When you're looking at sexual abuse of children, about 40% of them are older children doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And we always throw stepdad under the bus when it's not
Yeah.
certainly had a lot of bad stories there, but there's enough going around in the family to talk about other stuff going on there and other corners that you kind of need to be more aware of what's happening with children and what's going on there statistically. And that's a whole nother conversation,
Right.
into
Certainly.
stuff. But the again, the point of that is with this story, as I said, it was initially designed for foster care because. So we talk about the process. One thing we have to understand when kids come into foster care, the goal, obviously, the initial goal is not adoptions.
Yeah.
It's reunification. How do we get this family back together? How do we rebuild them here? I mean, that's the number one goal.
Sure.
That's the dream, right? If we can do this. And so, and if that's the dream with my foster families, when I'm working with them, I mentioned my, career working therapeutic foster care and foster care as well for adoptive families. When I'm working with my foster families, a big piece that I have to work with them on is real simple. How do we play nice with birth family? How do we support them, hopefully, towards getting their lives rebuilt? Our role in that, is a big piece of that. That's what
Reunification.
happened. Often the foster families are yeah, they often in foster, believe it or not, the people, birth family will listen to foster family before they listen to me because I'm the system, I'm the man, when
Yeah.
I'm in that role. But foster families can connect often with the family in that way, and so that this story is kind of geared towards saying, okay, I don't want you in terror of working with these folks because they are
Yeah.
human beings that we're dealing with, and so it brings out some of those dynamics to a degree, and yeah, Ben, I hope I hit what you
Well,
were looking for on that.
yeah. Listen, man. I think that story. I think that story brought to light so many different things. One of them, off the top of my head, for sure, is we all have we all have our own perspectives and our own opinions about people, and certainly when it comes to people going through certain things, we tend to jump to conclusions or judgments sometimes about things. And I think for me that story really helped me connect with the concept that it's a very it's a very strong Christian concept of, just like you said, man, having some empathy uh, on some of this, because the fact of the matter is, we're pretty fragile when it's all said and done, and I don't think any of us live a Teflon coated life, to steal the term from Don Truex. It was a great term, by the way. But yeah, I don't think any of us. I don't think any of us live a Teflon coated life. I think for the most part, we all are dealing with stuff, and oftentimes
Yes.
we just really need to give some people some grace sometimes. And I don't know that there's a more Christian uh, principle than that. I mean, certainly to see each other as human beings, because that's what we are. And the fact of the matter is, we've all got, like Kevin was telling us, we've all got things in the closet, and but the goal is
Yeah.
the goal is always reunification. And what I wanted to highlight there, and kind of get us to think about, is this parallel again with the spiritual. The goal is reunification with God,
Mhm.
and getting back home. And we've made a mess of things in our lives, and sometimes, look, the fact of the matter is, it's not always our fault, but the goal remains the same, and that's reunification with the Father. And I know we've been
Yes.
going about 51 minutes or so here, and
Mm.
I don't want to take up too much of
Well, it's
Kevin's
been a great
time,
conversation.
but
You're not
I
taking my
did.
time. I'm good.
Well,
I'm
listen,
enjoying it.
I did want to go ahead and certainly give you the opportunity to kind of shamelessly plug yourself, and give out any information, any credentials that you might think people would need to get a hold of you, to maybe look into this process. Because for Kayla and I, at least, I can say up to this point, and I know we haven't reached the goal yet, but my goodness, I feel like a door has been swung open, and we're like
Absolutely.
Kevin was telling us the other day, we're on now kind of a fast track towards this goal, and there's a lot of anticipation, a lot of questions, obviously, and fears, but um, Kevin has given me his phone number, and I am not afraid to call it. So I might be calling him later. But I did want to give Kevin a chance to kind of share that information with this audience. Maybe it's something you're interested in looking into. I would highly recommend, and propose to you that this is a gentleman, if you're interested in the state of Florida, um, to
Yes.
getting into that foster and adoption program, or I guess it would be fostering to adopt, that whole program. This guy can really hook you
Well,
up. And
let me say something real quick there before the whole
sure,
system gets furious with us in Florida.
we ain't worried about them.
Florida hates the term foster to adopt. Yeah, well, I just in case, because every now and then professional people who work this,
Yeah, you
and
probably know
let
more
me
than
say
I do.
why they hate. Yeah, what? As I said, the goal when a child is brought into the system. Now, there are of course exceptions when there's egregious abuse. Uh, that changes the goals. That can change the goal. But for the majority of cases, the initial goal, of course, is reunification. And so Florida, with good reason, good intent, does not like the term foster to adopt, because if you're going to become a foster parent, they need you to be gun ho for doing that. They need you to be on
Reunification
the same
process.
page with
Yeah,
that. And exactly. They need you to be involved in that process. But if you want to adopt from foster care, one of the things I like that, I like Florida's approach on that as well. Believe it or not, I know everybody talks about all the flaws of Florida. Florida's actually got a strong adoptions community, powerful, great community, got
Yes.
some great adoption lobbyists. Florida's got some amazing churches with support groups. Man, I was floored when living in Florida. I mean, I'm from
you're
the South.
flush.
I'm from North Carolina, and so when I'm from Yeah, I'm from small churches, and when I went to Florida and came across the mega church, I thought, man, that's got to be the devil, man. I mean, what can it be?
Maybe.
But I found out they had some of the best support groups in the world, man. They really had some good stuff going on, and I love them, man. I really do love them. I love what they do, and I
Yeah.
just share all that because when you're looking at what's going on there, the adoptions community is strong. One of the things that I love about what Florida does, Florida doesn't try. If I mentioned, Ben mentioned very early in the conversation about termination of parental rights. And one of the things, some
Yes.
states do not wait until the termination of parental rights before looking for an adoptive family. Personally, I think that's a major mistake
Yeah.
because until the judge brings down the hammer and says we're not looking at the birth family anymore, then the birth family is always on the table. They can always turn this thing around. They can always do that. And what happens often, this is going to sound very crass. I hope I'm not going to alienate too many people, but sometimes at that year mark, when they have what they call a permanency hearing, and if the judge does not see that birth family is making progress, making serious progress towards their goals of reunification, the judge will often, in essence, make a threat. And that threat is he'll say to DCF, he'll say, I think you guys might need to be looking at an adoptive family. And he doesn't necessarily want them to find an adoptive family. He's basically telling the birth family, get to move on, get the let out,
Right.
get your
Yeah.
act together to get your kid,
Yeah.
figure this
Yeah.
thing out. I mean, so it's not doing it out of malice. He or she is trying to motivate the family to do the right. The problem is DCF is going to listen to the judge,
Right.
and because that's the most powerful person in the room. So everybody's listening. He's got everybody's ear, and so they start looking for this adoptive family, and termination of parental rights has not happened yet. That's how you burn people out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're looking at adoption kid, and that's a different, your heart's in a different place. You're not looking at any temporary situation.
Yeah.
You're like, man, here we are, and then that kid is removed, and you're like, I don't know if I can live through that again.
Absolutely.
That's where families go with that, and so Florida understands that, so they
Yeah.
try to say we need lines to be clean here.
Yeah.
Things to be really clean here. So I just want to make sure I said that because
No,
people
you're
who know
yeah.
this business do listen. And
Yeah. And I think as we're wrapping up as well, Kevin, are you good with us leaving your email address on our page and everything?
That is the best way. Just reach out, shoot me an email. I mean, I do have a website called, the Adoption Focused MAPP,
Yeah.
Expedited MAPP. They can certainly go there, but just shoot me an email.
Okay.
One of the things I share with Ben is one of the things I wish is I could talk to people in the beginning of their journey.
Yes.
Just talk to them a little bit. There's no charge there. I'd be glad to talk to them.
Absolutely. And this could help serve as that sort of introduction as well. So something worth thinking about. So for everybody that's interested in learning more about what you can do to help with adoption, whether it's in Florida, North Carolina, Alabama, wherever, definitely reach out to Kevin. We will link his email address in the description of this video. And we will also have it in the description for our audio listeners as well on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify as well. And, we'll provide that. And you said it's adoption.
It's an adoption focused MAPP, MAPP, and MAPP is, by the way, in Florida. Florida has like maybe 6 or 7 trainings that they allow that are certified through them. Some of them are what they call therapeutic level trainings, and some of them are the traditional. MAPP is a training. There's the Florida-based MAPP, which is what I still kind of follow.
Right.
But MAPP is also really recognized across the U.S., which is why I stick with it, because people from anywhere, they're more likely to recognize that training than many of the other ones.
Right. Yeah. Well, we will certainly try to link those two things in our descriptions, so that way others can be able to do this and everything. And as we wrap up our episode for y'all's consideration, I would like to read a couple of verses from 2 Corinthians chapter 5, starting in verse 20, where it says, "So then, we are ambassadors for Christ, as God is pleading through us. We beg you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. He made him," talking about Jesus, "who knew no sin, to be sin on our behalf, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him. And so as we've been able to talk about all of these things together, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's very clear that we can see that adoption truly is the gospel.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Sunday Night Live. Join us again next week at 7 p.m. for another edition, and we also invite you to follow us on Facebook.
If you wish to contact us for future episode ideas or just to say hello, email us at sundaynightlive@gmail.com.
And until next time, I'm Trenton.
I'm Ben.
And we're signing off.